Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to discuss about bone and joint infections. This chapter, bone and joint infections, is a very important topic for you, both in exam as per your university exam point of view, as well as practicals, as well as for your PG entrance examinations. Now, before going, let us have an overview of bone and joint infections. So infection is something where a pathological microorganism spreads and multiplies in the body, leading to some disease or pathology in the body that causes the infection. So coming to the modes of spread, you have direct introduction. Direct introduction could be a minor trauma or some intra-articular injection or a pinprick, everything. These all come under direct introduction. Direct introduction of infection into the joint cavity or the musculoskeletal system. And the second one is direct spread from contiguous surfaces. That is, there could be some adjacent focus of infection, like a superficial infection, which may spread to the bone subsequently. And then the third one is indirect spread via bloodstream. There could be some focus of infection elsewhere in the body, and through the bloodstream it reaches the bones or musculoskeletal system. So these are the three modes of spread through which an infection spreads through the musculoskeletal system. So this infection, it leads to inflammation, whose aim is to eliminate the microorganism or at least to contain the infection. So this infection as well as this inflammation leads to the spectrum of clinical features, which we are going to see in our subsequent slides. So bone infection is more malicious than soft tissue infection. Why? First thing is, a bone is a rigid cavity. It is a rigid cavity. So whenever pus or any suppurative material accumulates in the bone, it has got no space to expand. As a result, it leads to increase in pressure, therefore there will be increase in pain, and there will also be chances of necrosis of the bone. Necrosis of the bone and the consequences from it make a bone infection more malicious. Now let us see different pathological mechanisms in subsequent slides, and you will understand better how bone infection is more dangerous. So in musculoskeletal infection, we have acute pyogenic bone infections, where there will be formation of pus in the metaphyseal region usually, and then it gets localized as abscess, and then it follows the path of least resistance, and then it tries to come out of the bony cavity. In chronic pyogenic infection, you have the infecting organism persisting, and there will be pockets of necrotic tissue and presence of sinuses. All these things I am just giving an outline, and we'll go, in subsequent slides we are going to see everything in detail. So in acute infection, there will be formation of abscess, and in chronic infection, there will be persistence of the infection and persistence of necrotic tissue, and presence of sinuses will be there. And the other part is chronic non-pyogenic infection, where there will be formation of granulomas, like in tuberculosis. These things will be dealt in next class by my colleague. So the main outline of the treatment is, first we have to identify the infective organism and initiate appropriate antibiotics, and along with that you should also provide analgesia and supportive measures like splinting and other NSAIDs should be given. And the pus should be released as soon as it is detected. The vascular and necrotic tissues should be debrided, and the bone should be stabilized. And then we have to maintain the soft tissue or skin cover. So these are all the various steps in the ladder of treatment. Identifying the organism, antibiotic therapy, splinting and supporting care, and then release of the pus, stabilization of the bone and the wound cover, and eradicating all the necrotic tissue before attaining the cover. These are all the different steps of treatment. Now, coming to the factors which increase the susceptibility of host to the infection can be divided into local factors and systemic factors. Coming to the local factors, there will be trauma which leads to hematoma formation, and it acts as a nidus for infection. And scar tissue where the circulation is poor, And sometimes in condition where there is decreased sensibility, like in trophic ulcers, there are increased chances of infection. And some chronic bone and joint disease also predispose the host to have infections. And presence of foreign bodies and implants may also add to the infection. And coming to the systemic factors, which leads to immunocompromised states like malnutrition, general debility, diabetes mellitus, rheumatoid disease, corticosteroid administration, and immunosuppression, either due to drugs or due to some diseases. All these things, they increase the susceptibility of host to infection. So whenever a patient comes, we have to take all these things into consideration when we diagnose the case. And while taking history also, all these aspects should be kept in mind while taking history. And coming to the osteomyelitis. Coming to the osteomyelitis. In osteomyelitis, here it is nothing but inflammation of the bone and bone marrow, which is caused by infective organisms. So this infection may be limited to single portion of bone or may involve numerous regions such as marrow, cortex, periosteum, and the surrounding soft tissues. So based on the duration and types of symptoms, it can be divided into acute, subacute, and chronic osteomyelitis. Usually, if the duration of symptoms is less than 2 weeks, we call it acute osteomyelitis. Between 2 to 6 weeks, you can call it subacute osteomyelitis. And if the duration exceeds more than 6 weeks, it is chronic osteomyelitis. Now coming to acute osteomyelitis. Acute osteomyelitis is being asked in university examinations repeatedly, either as a long question, that is 10 marks question, or short questions. Any part of the question can be taken and asked as a 2 marks question also. So let us discuss more in detail about acute osteomyelitis. In acute osteomyelitis, usually Staphylococcus aureus is the most common cause. And spread, as we have seen earlier, it is from a hematogenous infection usually, that is from a distant focus of infection, there will be lodging of the microorganisms leading to acute osteomyelitis, or some direct inoculation like some pinprick or open fracture. All these things, they can lead to direct inoculation. And sometimes from an adjacent source of infection, it is some septic arthritis or surrounding soft tissue infections. All these things may also contribute to the infection. It is most commonly seen in males, and the most common sites involved are the distal femur and the proximal end of tibia. And coming to the etiological agents, in infants, it is usually group B streptococci is the most common infecting organism, and in children and people more than 1 year, it is Staphylococcus aureus. This is the most common infective organism. And coming to the pathology, metaphysis of the long bones is the most common site of infection in acute osteomyelitis, because there in metaphysis, we have a small hairpin loop of blood vessels. As a result, the blood flow will be sluggish there, and there will be stasis in the circulation, which leads to the deposition of the microorganisms in the metaphysis. And also, certain studies, they showed that there will be diminished phagocytic activity in the metaphysis compared to the other regions of the bone. So, metaphysis is predisposed to the infections most commonly, acute osteomyelitis. This is one of the important points which we have to bear in mind. Metaphysis of the long bones is the most common site of infection. So coming to the pathology, it involves inflammation, suppuration, bone necrosis, reactive new bone formation, and which may lead to ultimate resolution and healing, or otherwise it may go into chronicity. So in inflammation, there will be chemotaxis, and all the inflammatory cells will be present there. And in suppuration, due to the activities of the proteolytic enzymes released by the neutrophils, there will be destruction of the microorganisms, dead bone and debris. All these things will be accumulating there. As a result, because of the pressure, this pus leads to pressure, and this pressure leads to bony necrosis, and the infective emboli may also hamper the blood circulation, which further leads to bony necrosis. And there will be, the bone will be dead, and periosteum will also be elevated, which we are going to see subsequently. And then there will be reactive new bone formation, that is, new bone is formed from the surrounding living tissues, living bone, and ultimately it may end up either healing or resolution, or otherwise, if the infection is persisting, it may lead to chronicity. So this is the long bone. This is the metaphyseal area, which is most commonly affected. And over this bone, you have the periosteum surrounding the bone. This is the periosteum. Usually, the bone has a periosteal blood supply and intramedullary blood supply. So this periosteal blood supply, it supplies the outer 1/3 of the bony cortex, and the inner 1/3 is supplied by the intramedullary vessels. So this is all about, briefly about the blood supply of the bone. So here we have the focus of infection. In metaphysis, the pus gradually accumulates. So this leads to the necrosis of the bone. Sometimes this pus gradually, it breaches the metaphyseal cortex and reaches the subperiosteal space for forming a subperiosteal abscess. So subperiosteal abscess is formed here. This subperiosteal abscess may either trickle down in the subperiosteal space, separating the periosteum from the diaphysis, leading to diaphyseal secretion, or it may rupture out through the periosteum, or it may travel into the adjacent, if the diaphysis is interarticular, it may move into the surrounding joint, leading to septic arthritis, or it may even affect the epiphyseal plate, or this abscess may also travel along the diaphysis, further occluding the blood vessels. So this is the pathology in acute osteomyelitis.
Community ophthalmology, the community of
So coming to the pathology, here we have the infective embolus. Infective embolus here, and this occludes the small vessels, leading to the necrosis of small area of the bone. And whenever there is infection, there will be hyperemia, that is increased vascularity, which leads to the inflammatory response. Because
so there is ocular involvement in the systemic disorders, quite frequent. Okay, there is ocular involvement in systemic disorders. It can be any type of thing. Okay.
Because of the inflammatory response, there will be destruction of the bacteria and
Involvement.
necrosis.
Ocular involvement. Okay, there is ocular involvement in the systemic disorders. Okay, ocular involvement in the systemic. Hello. Hello.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I'm having a small disturbance here. So coming to the pathology, there will be an abscess formation in the metaphyseal region, and this infect and వేరే వాయిస్ వినిపిస్తుంది. మాట్లాడుతుంటే వేరే వాయిస్ కూడా వస్తుంది. మాట్లాడుతున్నప్పుడు వేరే వాళ్ళ వాయిస్ వినిపిస్తుంది. Sorry for the interruption. Now let us continue with the pathology, where the metaphyseal area is the common site of infection. Metaphyseal area is the common site of infection. Here you can see the formation of pus and the suppurative material. This pus has gradually breached the cortex, metaphyseal cortex, and then it reached the subperiosteal space. Thank you. So this is the metaphyseal pus formation, and here here this pus, it gradually breaches the metaphyseal cortex and forms the subperiosteal abscess. This subperiosteal abscess, either it may escape under the periosteum as shown here in the picture. I am showing it with the cursor, or it may move into the joint. If at all the metaphysis is intra-articular, like in proximal femur or in proximal humerus, it moves intra-articularly. And as a result, so here in pathology of acute osteomyelitis, you have to remember 3 P's. That is, first thing is there is formation of the pus, which leads to increase in the pressure. And this pressure, because the bone is rigid and unyielding wall, the bony cortex is rigid and unyielding, there will be increase in the pressure. Following that, this follows the path of least resistance, and this pus travels through the Volkmann's canals and Haversian canals. It may enter the subperiosteal space, forming the subperiosteal abscess, or it may enter the medullary canal, separating the periosteum from the diaphysis. So this is the pathology in acute osteomyelitis. Please remember this, because the continuation of this pathological mechanism in acute osteomyelitis we are going to see in chronic osteomyelitis. So this is the same picture of acute pathology of acute osteomyelitis. And coming to the clinical features, the patient usually presents with acute pain and swelling, and there will be constitutional symptoms like fever. And around about the area which is involved, there will be swelling, warmth, and acute tenderness. So usually children between 2 to 6 years are most commonly involved, and there will be severe pain, malaise, and fever. And if neglected, this may take a fulminant course leading to a poor prognosis. And there will be pseudoparalysis. That is, the patient, because of the pain, will not be moving the affected limb as he moves the other normal limb. So this is pseudoparalysis. Apart from that, you will also have the signs of inflammation, like local rise of temperature will be there, and redness will be there because of the increased hyperemia, and tenderness will also be there in that region. So, and in children, most commonly, the periosteum is loose. So, as the periosteum is loose, the pus which goes into the subperiosteal space leads to the stripping of the periosteum from the adjacent cortex. So, these are all the things which we see in children. However, in infants, children less than 1 year, constitutional symptoms are usually mild. And along with that, these metaphyseal vessels, they will be communicating with the epiphyseal vessels. As a result, the infection which is localized to the metaphysis will spread to the epiphysis, and the physis will also be affected. As a result, the physis, as you know, is the area where there is growth, the growth of the skeleton occurs in infants. So when the physis is affected, there will be growth disturbances, and along with growth disturbances also there will be deformities occurring. So these are all the different features which we see in infants. And coming to the adults, here most commonly it is due to direct inoculation rather than hematogenous spread, the cause of acute osteomyelitis. And the most common site of infection is thoracolumbar spine. This point is very important. It has been asked in your entrance examinations. So thoracolumbar spine is the most common site of hematogenous infection in adults. Usually they have mild fever. The symptoms are less compared to that of children. And there will be difficulty in bearing weight when lower limb is involved. So these are all the things clinical features which we see. And coming to the radiological features. And in early stages, there are no significant radiological changes in early stages on an X-ray. And subsequently, because of increased hyperemia, there will be increased resorption of the calcium leading to the lysis of the bone. There will be small lytic lesions. And as we have seen in the pathology, since the periosteum gets stripped, there will be reactive newborn formation, that is periosteal reaction, which I am showing with my cursor here. There will be periosteal reaction and there will be lytic lesions in the bone. So these are all the radiological changes. Usually it takes 10 to 14 days for these X-ray changes to appear. Until then you will not have any X-ray changes. But there is an investigation called bone scan through which you can detect acute osteomyelitis, and these changes appear prior to the X-ray changes. So this depends on the principle is the phosphate uptake by the bony tissue. That is the main principle involved in bone scan. Technetium 99 bone scans, though it is not specific to acute osteomyelitis, we can identify the condition. And there are also modifications like indium label, leukocytes labeled with indium 111 can also be used for bone scan to identify the acute osteomyelitis. So these are all the different investigations. And coming to the laboratory findings, there will be increased WBC count, increased ESR and CRP. Blood culture will also reveal the causative organisms. So these are all the radiological features and investigations. And coming to the diagnostic criteria of Petola and Wahmanens, this is given in postgraduate entrance examinations. So out of the following criteria, at least 2 of the criteria must be present. First thing is, on aspiration of the affected bone, we have to get the pus, and there should be positive bacterial culture from bone or blood. And clinical features of acute osteomyelitis, more often in children, these signs are given: lethargy, irritability, fever, local bony tenderness, and local limb swelling, local erythema, and local rise of temperature, pseudo-paralysis, and effusion of the nearby joints. These are all different clinical features which are seen, and typical radiographic changes of osteomyelitis, which we have seen in the earlier slide. 2 of the following criteria must be met to diagnose acute osteomyelitis. And these are the NADI's principle which guide the treatment. First thing is, when there is antibiotic therapy is effective only before the pus formation. And once the pus has formed, antibiotics cannot cure the pathology. Evacuation of the pus should be the mainstay of the treatment. Only after the evacuation of pus happens, then antibiotics that prevent further formation of the pus. Evacuation of the pus restores the periosteum and it restores the blood flow. And after the surgical procedure also, the antibiotic should be given. So these are the 5 principles, and it can be asked in your multiple choice questions. That's why I have mentioned it. It's not given in Maheshwari or Natarajan. Just because it is being asked in entrances, I have mentioned it here. And coming to the treatment. First thing is splinting. Splinting is providing support to the affected part. Suppose the child has acute osteomyelitis or a lesion in the proximal tibia. So he should be given a slab or some splint to provide rest to the part, and it relieves the pain. And apart from that, initially, as soon as the child presents, before we take the samples for culture, some empirical antibiotic should be started. And after that, when we get the culture and sensitivity report, based on it, we can start broad spectrum antibiotics. Specific antibiotics, which should be given for 6 weeks. Initially, intravenously for at least 1 week, and then subsequently, oral antibiotics can be given, specific antibiotic, after sending the samples for culture and sensitivity. In case of abscess, if the abscess has formed, surgical drainage is the treatment of choice. If it were a subperiosteal abscess, then incision and drainage should be done. We have to take care that excess periosteum is not removed from the bone, because already because of the subperiosteal abscess and separation of the periosteum from the underlying cortex, there will be some jeopardy in the blood supply. So if we further strip the periosteum, the blood supply is further hampered, leading to necrosis of the bone. So we should take care that excess periosteum is not stripped. So this in case of subperiosteal abscess, soft tissue abscess. And if the pus is localized to the medullary cavity, few drill holes are made in the bony cortex to drain the pus. This not only drains the pus, but will also relieve the intraosseous pressure, thereby relieving the pain. So these are all the treatment principles in acute osteomyelitis. And coming to the complications. Septic arthritis. Septic arthritis is one of the complications, as we have seen in this picture. Suppose this is the joint capsule, and here you can see the metaphysis is intra-articular, so it may lead to septic arthritis here. Or if the pus is inadequately drained, it may lead to chronic osteomyelitis. So it may lead to septic arthritis if the metaphysis is intra-articular, or in case of infants, it may lead to septic arthritis. In children, we have seen there will be destruction of the epiphyseal plate. And with the destruction of epiphyseal plate, which has the growth potential, which is the center of growth in growing skeleton, it may lead to limb length discrepancy or deformities. This you will understand in our subsequent classes. And then if there is persistence of infection, if there is improper drainage, it may lead to chronic osteomyelitis and then pathological fractures. Here, because of this disease process, there will be destruction of the bone, which leads to the weakening of the bone. As a result, with a trivial trauma, usually for a fracture to happen, there should be significant trauma. But in conditions where the bone is already weakened because of some pathological process, there will be even a trivial trauma can lead to fracture. That is pathological fracture. And this septicemia, the focus of infection, it may spread through hematogenously or through lymphatics, and it may lead to septicemia. So these are all the different complications of acute osteomyelitis. And coming to the differential diagnosis, we have acute septic arthritis and cellulitis. In acute septic arthritis also, there will be pseudo paralysis, and there will be constitutional symptoms like high grade fever, local inflammation, inflammatory signs, etc. However, in acute septic arthritis, the child will not let you touch the joint, and the range of motion of the joint is severely painful. That is one of the differential diagnosis, and you can aspirate the pus from the joint. We are going to see about acute septic arthritis in our subsequent slides. Cellulitis is a superficial infection. We can almost make out the difference between the diseased part and the normal part. And in bone scan, which we have discussed earlier, we can differentiate using bone scan and MRI. We can differentiate between cellulitis and the acute osteomyelitis. When we talk about bone scan in our subsequent classes, we'll deal about the findings in cellulitis. And coming to the subacute osteomyelitis, this is duration, as we have seen in earlier slide, it's between 2 to 6 weeks. The onset is insidious and the disease progresses slowly. Usually it is caused by less virulent type of organism or in a host with high resistance. And two main types of subacute osteomyelitis we're going to discuss in this class. One is Brodys abscess and the other one is Gary's osteomyelitis. So Brodys abscess. So here I am showing it with the cursor. Here there is this is an abscess in the medulla of the bone, which is usually a result of low-grade infection, usually by Staphylococcus. It is commonly seen in the metaphyseal region. And once again, distal femur, proximal tibia, and distal tibia are more commonly affected. This point can also be asked in entrance examinations. And coming to the pathology, here we have a well-defined cavity in the metaphyseal region, usually containing glary seropurulent fluid. This cavity is lined by the granulation tissue, which is containing mixture of acute and chronic inflammatory cells, and the surrounding bony trabeculae are often thickened. Normally, the patient is a child or adolescent who has pain near one of the larger joints for several weeks or months. The pain is not so severe as it is in acute osteomyelitis, but they'll be having some dull pain, sometimes more at night time, and he or she may be having a limp. There will be slight swelling and surrounding muscle wasting because of disuse, and there will be local tenderness present. The WBC counts in blood culture are usually normal, but at times ESR is elevated. And coming to the radiological features, we have a well-circumscribed lytic lesion surrounded by zone of sclerosis. This is usually 1 to 2 centimeters in size. So this is the typical radiological picture of a metaphyseal lesion, and a metaphyseal lesion usually does not show any periosteal reaction. And the mainstay of treatment is immobilization with antibiotics. If conservative treatment there is no response, or when we have doubt about our diagnosis, then we'll go for open biopsy and curettage of the lesion, and depending on the histopathological diagnosis, our treatment will be continued. And coming to the Gary's osteomyelitis. Gary's osteomyelitis is diffuse sclerosing inflammatory lesion of the shafts of long bones. It is usually non-separating and granulating lesion. Tibia is the most common site which is involved, and there will be diffuse dull aching pain over the involved area, usually more during the night time. There will be tenderness on deep palpation. Coming to the radiological features, there will be marked thickening and increased density of the cortex. And there will be partial obliteration of the marrow space. Excision of the abnormal area followed by bone grafting and stabilization is the treatment. Brody's abscess is a very important question, usually asked as a 2 marks question or a 4 marks question. So then next we are going to see about chronic osteomyelitis. Chronic osteomyelitis is once again asked as a 10 marks question or a 4 marks question in your examinations. We have seen the pathology of acute osteomyelitis. Suppose if the pyogenic infection is persisting for more than 6 weeks and it is characterized by discharging sinuses which discharge pus and bony spicules. These are all the hallmarks of chronic osteomyelitis. Then we can call it a chronic osteomyelitis. And remember, there will be episodes of remissions and exacerbations. That is, recurrent attacks of inflammation will be seen in chronic osteomyelitis. And sequestrum and involucrum are the hallmarks of chronic osteomyelitis. Now let us see what this sequestrum and involucrum are. So this is the pathology which we have seen in acute osteomyelitis. And we have the long bone here, and this is the site of say abscess formation. Here we have the periosteum which got stripped. As a result, a part of the bone may get necrotic here. This necrotic piece of bone is called sequestrum. Sequestrum is nothing but this necrotic piece of bone. Here we have seen because of the subperiosteal abscess, the periosteum gets separated here. The periosteum got separated, and there will be a decrease in blood supply to this area. And because of the decrease in blood supply, the bone gets necrosed. This necrosed piece of bone gradually separates itself from the surrounding living bone. I'm showing with the cursor from the surrounding living bone. This dead bone gets separated. This separated dead bone is called sequestrum. And then around this sequestrum gets separated and it is surrounded by the granulation tissue. And as it gets separated from the granulation tissue, the surrounding there will be formation of new bone surrounding this piece. And this new bone formation, which happens around the sequestrum, this new bone is called involucrum. So this is the pathological process which is involved. So coming to the etiology, improper drainage of pus in acute stage and presence of foreign bodies will also contribute to the chronic osteomyelitis. And as I have explained previously, there will be stripping of the periosteum and there will be loss of blood supply to the cortical bone. And as a result, there will be non-viable bone, that is the sequestrum, which is formed. And the healing response leads to the formation of new bone, which is the involucrum. Here you can see, this is the sequestrum. And coming to the clinical features, whenever you can say, whenever there is a case of chronic osteomyelitis, there will be persisting sinus, which is discharging either pus or bony pieces, these dead pieces of bone. Sometimes some bony spicules will be getting discharged from the sinus. So that is present. And as you see in this picture, there will be some exposed bone, and the sinus will be having some granulation tissue, and there will be non-healing wound because of repeating episodes of inflammation. There will be dusky color of the skin here, you can appreciate here in the slide. There will be cicatrix formation, and there will be scarring of the muscles and contractures of the adjacent joints. Because of the episodes of new bone formation, there will be irregular new bone formation. You have the thickening of the bone. So in the case of chronic osteomyelitis, we will be having a sinus which is discharging the pus or bony spicules, and then there will be protruding granulation tissue, and externally we have a non-healing wound, and on palpation we have tenderness and thickening of the bone, and adjacent muscles and joints are also scarred in extreme cases. So these are all the clinical features of chronic osteomyelitis. And coming to the radiological features, I have explained the pathology previously. In early stages, there will be moth-eaten and osteoporotic appearance of the bone. And here you can see the sequestrum, which I am showing with the cursor. This dense bone is sequestrum. It lies as an irregular piece of bone surrounded by a narrow zone of diminished density, that is the granulation tissue. You can see small lucent zone around the sequestrum, which is because of the presence of granulation tissue. And this is the involucrum, that is the reactive new bone which is formed. So these are all the different radiological features, presence of sequestrum and involucrum. These are the hallmark of chronic osteomyelitis. And there is a staging called Sirini-Medar staging system based on the involvement of the bone. So in type 1, only the disease is localized to the medullary cavity, and in type 2 there will be superficial cortical surface involvement, and in type 3 only a small part of the long bone is involved. However, both cortex and medulla are involved. There will not be any compromise in the stability of the bone. And in type 4, so there will be some instability along with the features which are seen in first, second and third. Diffuse a significant segment of the bone is involved, which may lead to instability. This is based on the bone disease. And based on the host, type A host is normal individual, and in type B host, there will be some patient is compromised by some local or systemic conditions. And in type C, there will be severe compromised by local and systemic conditions. So based on this, we can grade the patient. This is also most commonly asked in entrance examinations. That's why it's being displayed here. And coming to the treatment. The mainstay of treatment is identification of the causative organism, and appropriate antibiotic should be given, and measures to improve the general condition of the patient should also be taken. And coming to the surgical management, sequestrectomy, saucerization, and stabilization of the bone. Saucerization is nothing but bone is a closed cavity. Suppose this is a long bone, and here you have to de-roof. You have to de-roof the cavity, which is called saucerization, and then this dead necrotic piece of bone, it should be removed. That is called sequestrectomy. And this sequestrectomy should be done when after following serial radiographs, there should be well-formed involucrum in the X-ray. Only then we can do the sequestrectomy. Otherwise, the stability of the bone will be at stake. And then if at all there is any bony defect, the bone should be stabilized using appropriate internal fixation measures or using an X-fix. It depends on the disease condition. And then we are going to see in detail about sequestrum, because it's usually asked as a 4 marks question. Sequestrum is a loose piece of bone that gets separated from the rest of the living bone and is lined by granulation tissue. All these things we have seen earlier, we have discussed when we talked about pathology. Now I just want to summarize all the points about the sequestrum so that it will be easy for you to note it down. And sequestrum is asked as a 4 marks question or a 2 marks question. Sequestrum is nothing but a loose piece of bone that gets separated from the rest of the living bone and is lined by granulation tissue. The surface which is in contact with the granulation tissue is rough, and the outer cavity which is nearer to the pus is smooth and shiny. The cortical sequestrum is usually flat with serrated edges. Diaphyseal sequestrum is seen in children. In children, we have seen earlier that the periosteum is loose. Suppose this is the bone and you have the periosteum here. Because the periosteum is loose, the pus will be separating the periosteum easily. As a result, complete diaphysis may get involved, leading to the formation of diaphyseal sequestrum in children. And coming to the gross appearance, sequestrum appears ivory white in color, and it is a brittle piece of bone and with smooth and rough surfaces, and it lies freely in the parent bone in a cavity, and it is free from the parent bone. And there will not be any capillary bleeding seen in the sequestrum, and it sinks in the water. And different types of sequestra which are seen are tubular sequestrum, which is seen in pyogenic infections. Ring sequestrum is seen in external fixators. I'll explain it later. And then black color, depending on color, morphology, the sequestra are different types I have given here. Coralliform cork-like sequestra are seen in Perthes disease and tuberculosis respectively. Sandy sequestrum is seen in tuberculosis and feathery sequestrum in syphilis. So coming to the, I told I will explain about the ring sequestra, which is seen in external fixators. Ring sequestrum was asked as a 2 marks question. So whenever you have a long bone here, and there will be X-fix application, external fixator. That is, these are the, assume it to be Schanz pins. These are the Schanz pins which are applied in the cortex, and this is the connecting rod. And here, where the Schanz pin enters the bone, there will be some necrosis of the bone. And the sequestrum which is formed here is the ring sequestrum. And And coming to the complications of chronic osteomyelitis, pathological fractures are one of the most common complications of chronic osteomyelitis, followed by acute exacerbations, and there will be deformity and shortening if at all physis is involved, and then as we have seen earlier, and there will be bony defects. During sarcorization and sequestrectomy, there could be bony defects which may compromise the stability of the bone, and there will be muscle fibrosis and adjacent joint stiffness. The sinus tract may show malignant changes, and then amyloidosis is another complication. Please remember all the complications because you may have PG bits. Like which of the following is not a complication of acute chronic osteomyelitis? They may give a question like that and give 4 options of which you have to choose. So then there is another condition called Madura foot. Mycetoma of the foot starts as a nodular swelling on the foot, and infection usually enters through a minor injury to the foot like a thorn prick. The initial nodule bursts, and then there will be thin discharging pus which contains small granules. This indurated swelling spreads, and then blisters form and they burst, resulting in multiple discharging sinuses. This mycotic infection usually does not involve the bone till the last stage, and the treatment is localized debridement or excision. So then we have septic arthritis, but because the time is already up, we're going to discuss about septic arthritis in next classes. And coming to today's class, we have seen about acute osteomyelitis, subacute osteomyelitis, and chronic osteomyelitis. Now, if you have any doubt, I'm opening the chat box. Please please type your queries here. Or this is my email ID. You can send your queries to this email ID also. So coming to today's class, we have discussed about acute osteomyelitis, the pathology where the metaphysis is the most common region which is involved, and then there will be formation of pus or accumulation of the suppurative material in the metaphysis, and then this metaphysis, it leads to intraosseous pressure increase in intraosseous pressure, and this metaphysis and the suppurative material, it either strips off the periosteum and forms the subperiosteal abscess. It may give away from the it may break the periosteum and go into the adjacent soft tissues, or it may travel along the space between the diaphyseal bone and the periosteum, or it may travel along the diaphysis, or it may travel into the adjacent joint, or it may lead to septicemia or septicemia by lymphatic and hematogenous spread. This acute osteomyelitis, because of vascular emboli, thrombosis, infective thrombus, or because of the pressure effects, there will be the blood supply to the bone will be jeopardized. As a result, there will be necrosis of the bone, leading to the formation of sequestrum. And as a result of defensive mechanisms and stripping of the periosteum, there will be surrounding new bone formation, which is the involucrum. So this is the spectrum of pathology which we see from acute to chronic osteomyelitis. And if neglected, acute osteomyelitis may lead to disastrous consequences. So appropriate antibiotic treatment should be initiated, the pus must be evacuated. These are the lines of treatment. In chronic osteomyelitis also, the sequestrum should be removed. A sequestrum should be removed, and as we remove the dead bone and we reach the live bone, there will be small punctate capillary hemorrhages. This is called paprika sign, which is a sign of living bone. So this ensures the adequacy of the debridement or removal of the dead tissue. So that is the surgical treatment in case of chronic osteomyelitis, and in both cases appropriate antibiotic should be given. Maintenance of hydration, improvement of general condition of the patient, nutrition of the patient, all these things, they should also be taken care of. So in a nutshell, this is about acute and chronic osteomyelitis, and in our subsequent classes, in the next class, we are going to discuss about septic arthritis and other bone and joint infections. Thank you. Next class,
క్లోజ్ చేస్తాము
డౌట్స్ ఏం అడగలేదు
సరే
డౌట్ నేనే టైప్ చేస్తాను ఉంది వచ్చింది So because of the lack of time, these doubts, there is a question, what is the difference between involucrum and normal bone? This I will tell you in the subsequent class, because of I think next faculty is waiting here, so I will elaborate it in the next class. Sir, next class sir వచ్చేసారు
ఇక్కడ
క్లోజ్ చేసేసారు సెషన్ పాజ్ లో పెట్టారు టైప్ చేస్తారు సార్ అయిపోయింది